Welcome, 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 Nashvillians and people of various other municipalities. I am Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt Murphy on the Matt Murphy Show, and we're going to have a good day. It's Friday. You've made it. I see Mason back there. It looks like he's made it.
Doing our best.
The blood, the bruising, it's okay. It's fine. To put it mildly, I always need your help in the show. I need not just Mason's help to make sure I don't break anything. And there's a lot of buttons and widgets and dials and sliders.
Hey, don't touch that.
Don't touch it. I'm not going to touch it. However, I love you guys participating on the Super Talk text line, 615-737-9986. That's 615-737-9986. You can call in too, but I get it. Texting is communication. I have 3 kids. I have now I have 4. I have another son in the house. Very excited. Very excited to have him on board. But I've got phones and they text. That's how they communicate. If I ask any of them, how was your day? When you have boys in your house, the answer is singular every time. Good. Do you have food? That's how it goes. That is literally all of my days. And my wife encourages me. She is a wonderful woman who she wants me to talk to them and use words. And the challenge with particularly teenage boys and the words is we do a lot of staring. So I'll ask, what's your favorite subject? How's Spanish going? Good. And then we stare. And then I ask them to expound. And every day, these are the things that we go forward. It's Friday, so I'll lead with a good story. Recently in my house, we had a bit of a health thing. My wife has dealt with diabetes stuff for a while, and I was calling my brother, who is Drew's a wonderful brother as far as brothers go. High marks. He was on a company, he works for Paylocity, was on a company trip, having a good time, and I think it was Costa Rica or something. And I called him just to check in. I forgot he was not readily available. He answers the phone. And I was telling him about what was going on, and I was talking about some of the complications potentially from diabetes. Now, mind you that some of the extreme complications are nowhere a potential concern for my wife or my family. This is simply, hey, we need to, get the blood sugar stuff under control, that kind of thing. My brother, unbeknownst to me, I should have known it was a little bit strange, but my brother said, man, you have it rough. And one of his daughter was actually in the hospital with E. coli, right? While he was out of town. So I'm thinking, no, man, you have it pretty bad. This is rough. He's like, let me pray for you right now. And I said, okay, cool. Like, I'm down with this. I believe in the power of prayer. So he's praying for me and my family, and it's just real earnest. Unbeknownst to me, my brother had been at a work event and had a couple of adult beverages. And what he heard in the takeaway of the exchange was that my wife was going to have her legs removed. And so that was the reason for the immediate prayer, was there was a concern that there was going to have to be some amputation.
That's a little concerning.
Yes.
Just a little bit.
And what was better is he then calls my mom.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. My brother, because if y'all know Drew, he is like one of the most genuine, kind-hearted humans, right? Like he connects, man. He feels that empathy. And when those legs are going, we're having a private Dan moment. It's like, she ain't got no legs. Like it is serious. And so he's like, well, I just got to call mom. And so he calls mom. Keep in mind that my parents are very conservative and pretty close to teetotalers, right? And my brother calls my mom about the amputations, and my mom starts freaking out. And it's just like, man, This is just so much on the family. I'm not sure Cameron's going to be able to handle it. This is just, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? And she calls me and she's like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, Mom, I'm fine. What's going on? She's like, well, we heard about Justine's legs. And I'm like, tell me more. Should be good. And so that, to me, first of all, I have like 20 family members that live in the Middle Tennessee area, so it's wonderful to have family around. But that helps me put context on Friday, that it could always be worse. It could always be more wild.
Absolutely.
And, that stuff happens, right? I'm sure you guys have had family that there's a game of telephone that happens and everybody calls everybody. And, then before you know it, my dad's calling me to have lunch, and he's like, son, we're concerned about your joy. And I'm like, probably because you thought my wife was going to have her legs cut off. Like, that is very concerning. And I'm blessed to have family that care. I'm blessed to have family around. I thought that was a funny story, and I just wanted to share it with you guys to kind of lead off the show, set the mood a little bit. We got plenty of things to talk about. I understand that the big story is and will be till next week what's going to happen in the House of Representatives. You guys know it. I know it. The surprise, I'm texting with members, and I'm looking at it, and I'm right now I think it might be Jim Jordan. Last week I looked at it, and I thought Jim Jordan maybe had 70 votes, 100 votes on a good day. But the two front runners, Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan, are right there. And here's the hilarity in all of this. Jim Jordan is chairman of Judiciary. He works well with leadership. Steve Scalise is part of the leadership team. He's standing right there with Kevin McCarthy in all of this. And so Gates and co. vote with the Democrats, toss McCarthy. McCarthy says, okay, cool, I'm out. Then Republicans are left to elect somebody. And the hope is, it's your hope and mine, I assume, that Republicans elect a speaker on their own without having to go to Democrats and make deals and do a coalition government. I'm not against Democrats and Republicans voting together because I'm a realist. You have to. In a divided government, guess what? You've got to work with Democrats to get what you want. You won't get all of it. You may have to surrender some ground. But the essential win is always moving in a conservative direction. It may not be the big gains you want. The big gains must come at a time when you've got the majority of the House, the Senate, and the White House. That's just the reality. The left is no different. The left has to move it far to the left when they've got the trifecta. But when it's split like it is now and the margins are narrow, it's really hard to move stuff. That's the reality. And so the comedy here, you guys remember that shutdown thing we were talking about a couple weeks ago that was narrowly averted? The whole thing that got Kevin McCarthy pitched in the first place? That it was, well, Kevin McCarthy, he got Democrats to vote for a CR, a continuing resolution to continue government spending levels. Right? Well, when they enacted that law, they gave them 45 days to kind of figure it out, right? Now, there's some folks on this station, some of you that are like, we need to return to regular order. A lot of you guys hear that. You probably don't know what it means. Budget Control Act 1974. I'm going to talk about this till the cows come home. It will bore you to death. So I won't go into all the details, but it sets out the process for the federal budgetary process. Starts with the president putting out his budget, which is basically a wish list. It doesn't really matter. It's here are my priorities. Here's all the things. Tons of fluff. They scatter it all around Capitol Hill. And then everybody's off to the races. There are 12 appropriations bills. These are the vehicles for funding government. The whole point of dividing the federal government up into these different appropriations bills is so that it's not winner take all. It isn't one size fits all. There's 12. So if you don't like commerce, justice, and science and say there's a lot of fluff in here that I don't like that's super woke, so I'm not going to support it. Cool. Well, you can support the DOD appropriation. So DOD gets funded and maybe the other one gets held up for a minute. So it's not this government on, government off. This is eminently predictable. We should do this every year. It's not complicated. It's process and procedure is what it is. The problem with a continuing resolution or an omnibus. So continuing resolution is we're going to continue the spending levels and just kind of kick the can down the road. An omnibus is we're going to roll these different appropriations bills together, one or more of them, into a big spending bill. We're going to jam a lot of stuff in there, and we're going to tell you have to eat it or people won't, or kids won't get fed. Paychecks won't be sent. That's how this works. This is the high stakes, high pressure politics. Don't buy it. Nobody has to do this. Nobody has to do this. Not Republicans, not Democrats, but for the better part of 30 years, this is what we do. Is just this high stakes, high pressure to force people to support something that has things in it they don't love. I'm all about compromise. Like, that's a reality. I know that's a dirty word in politics, but unless you've got solid majorities in the House, the Senate, and you've got the White House, you're going to have to compromise if you want to do anything. Otherwise, you're just messaging. Otherwise, you're going on cable news and saying Democrats are bad, Republicans are bad, yay, yay, rah, rah, and nothing happens. So let's go back to what happened with Gaetz and McCarthy, the 8 Republicans joining Democrats to toss McCarthy. Let's just say hypothetically it's Jordan or Scalise, both of which I prefer. I prefer Scalise because I think a Southern speaker is better for people in the South because that's his context, that's his way of life. And yes, I know Louisiana is different. Yes, I know he cheers for LSU, but I think that there's skepticism on the Hill about blue state Republicans. So McCarthy is a California Republican. It's like, do you really get what it's like to be a Republican in Tennessee or a Republican somewhere in a deep red state? The answer is no. Ohio's a swing state. It's definitely conservative now. Jordan is seen as a staunch conservative. So is Scalise, for that matter. But the problem is one of them probably, hopefully, will be Speaker of the House. They'll have basically a month to do all the appropriations bills. And I want you to think about what that means. That means they navigate them through the House and enact them, or I should say pass them. Then they have to go through the Senate and either be conferenced and worked out or not. Now, that's just not a lot of time to do the rest of the remaining appropriations bills. It's not. So we're probably going to have another continuing resolution or an omnibus spending bill that gets us through where we need to go until we do this whole thing again. The problem there, and I talked to Chris Hand on Wednesday when we were handing off. I was filling in for Dan Mandis, and then I handed over to Chris. And I just asked him point blank. I said, Chris, what's the game plan here? You're clearly supporting the 8. You think that he says, well, Democrats sided with them. They didn't side with Democrats. I pointed out that the vote total doesn't care. It's all the Democrats and 8 Republicans. I said, are we just going to do this again if Speaker Scalise or Speaker Jordan pushes a continuing resolution or an omnibus? And he said, yes. I said, sure, we're going to do it again. We'll vacate the chair. We'll shut down the government. We'll do it. All that sounds, yay, rah. The result of that is not only do Republicans not retain the House in an election where they should win the Senate, it starts to be in doubt. Because for the vast majority, and I hear it time and time again, that's like, well, just shut it down. Okay. If you do that for very long, history shows this. This isn't me. The longest shutdown that we've had has been a little over a month during the Trump administration. You don't have enough Republican votes to shut the government down for very long, and then they cave, and then they pay back pay, and then it actually ends up costing us a lot more to shut the government down than to keep it open. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but that's exactly what ends up happening. You essentially pay federal bureaucrats for a vacation. We'll talk a little bit more about this, but I want us to think through this. I want to hear what you have to say. During the break, I'm going to go to the Super Talk text line, message back and forth. And when we come back, we'll answer some of your text and continue the conversation. I'm Cameron Smith, and you're listening to The Matt Murphy Show. Welcome back. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt. You can also engage the conversation over on X at D. Cameron Smith. That's David Cameron Smith at D. Cameron Smith on X and Twitter. Feel free to yell at me. My mom's not on Twitter. She doesn't see this stuff. So knock yourself out. The Super Talk text line, again, 615-737-9986. That's it. That's what you got to do to be a part. I'm checking them out, finishing the last ones. I'm going to try to get back to you guys during the break and engage this. I also found, and I'll tweet this out just so you guys can see it. Again, it's important. I'm an opinion columnist over at the Tennessean on the editorial board. I write for Advanced Local, so I got all these opinions, right? I'm on talk radio. I do this stuff. It's really informed that it's not just about our feelings and our opinions. There's got to be facts. We got to have some things that we agree on don't change because of how we feel. And so the Congressional Research Service, if y'all haven't heard of the Congressional Research Service, this used to be sort of the cheat sheet. Like when I worked on Capitol Hill, CRS reports were not made available to the public unless a member of Congress decided to release one. Now they are. You can just Google them. And it really helps understand what's going on. And you can see the appropriation status table for fiscal year 2024. You can see that the House has passed 4 appropriations bills: Defense, Homeland Security, Milcon VA, and State Foreign Operations. The Senate has passed 0. None of them have passed both chambers. None have been vetoed. None have been signed by the president. I'll pick another fiscal year. Let's pick 2017. That's Donald Trump is president. That's what we're talking about. How many of the bills passed? Anybody got a guess? Anybody? House of Representatives, 5. Senate, 3. Signed by the president, 12. Then you say, how? How did this happen? Well, an omnibus that rolls them all together. Trump signed those. In the interim, he signed multiple continuing resolutions. So I just want to challenge this notion that the continuing resolution in the omnibus is the problem. If it was, then Trump's not your guy. Because Trump signed tons of spending legislation, tons of deficit spending that added to the debt. And that's not about my opinion. That's just fact. I can show you the receipts. So if the problem was that, well, Kevin McCarthy pushed another continuing resolution, well, that can't be it. So it must be that he went with Democrats to do it, that he got Democrats to move a continuing resolution. Well, okay, but then Matt Gaetz then does the same thing to get rid of McCarthy. What are we doing here? Because the truth is, Democrats are not going to help on any conservative policy. They're just not. They're happy to help us look like a clown show. They're happy to let us kick McCarthy to the curb, and frankly, Jordan, Scalise, and anybody else that anybody decides we should get rid of. They're going to say, okay, cool. This helps us get the House back and helps us in the Senate races. We can just say you guys don't know how to govern. You can't even keep the lights on. So I think we have to have an answer here for, well, what is it that we want and what do we get by doing this stuff? Because I agree with you that it's not going well. $33 trillion in debt, a porous southern border, a regulatory state that's out of control. I'm with you. I'm there. My question again and again is, do you want us to describe the problem? Do you want somebody to go on cable news and tell you, man, we've got a problem. We need to do something about this. We need to enact a balanced budget. We need to have Pick your favorite conservative policies. Do you want them to do that, or do you want them to figure out how to move conservative laws? Shrink the size of government, rein in the regulatory state. Because that's boring and difficult, and it's a lot of work. It's really easy to go and say, here's what we should do. We just need to do it. How? That's my ask of you. Sandra, I see you on the super text line. We should continue the past behaviors so we can hand our kids and grandkids $45 trillion by 2027. Absolutely not. But here's my question to Sandra. You know how this works. If you want to reduce the size of government, rein in spending, do this stuff, do you need to go on cable news and say it? Do you need to tell the press that? Or do you need to build a majority that says no? We're going to go back to pre-COVID spending levels. The answer is obvious. This isn't subjective. This isn't a matter of Sandra's opinion or mine. But the tactics have to change because we think we're winning, and really we're just being directionally loud. We'll talk more about that on the other side of the break. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt Murphy on Super Talk 99.7. Welcome back. Appreciate you guys. Super Talk text line 615-737-9986. I see you, James, on the phones. I'm sorry, guys. The phone lines were left closed after the last show. Mason just opened them up. So if you want to call in and you got a busy signal, now you can do it. Love the conversation every time. I'm sorry for those of you on the Super Talk text line that are offended by the facts about appropriations and are offended that Donald Trump signed so much deficit spending. I don't know what to tell you. I don't have the ability to go back and say he didn't do a thing he did. So that's not my opinion. I got the receipts. That's not. You do it with it as you will. I'm reporting. You're deciding, not me. Sandra said something on the super text line that I wanted to address. I'll just read what she wrote. Here's my issue. Even when we have the majority, we do nothing with it. We're always told we have to pass it this time and we'll fight next time, and they never do. Frustrating. A freaking men. I am with you. In fact, when I worked on the Senate Judiciary Committee for Jeff Sessions, he was a fiscal hawk. He did not understand this idea of non-essential employees being employed. He did not get the idea that we should just deficit spend because we want things. He said, we ask too much of the American people already in terms of tax burden. They're busting their tails to get it done. And here's what we have. So we would push conservative policies, and then, and I can remember her name, but I will not say it on the air because I don't want to cast a negative light on her. But I remember the name of the staffer from Mitch McConnell's office that would come down to our Senate judiciary offices and tell us why we couldn't do conservative things. And it sent me off the handle because it was always living to fight another day and never actually fighting. And it frustrated me. It made me really mad. It made me think that nobody seriously was conservative. And you know why I thought that? Because they weren't. This is the hard thing for people to realize, is that hardcore fiscal conservatives in the House of Representatives, and I'm talking about people that would actually reduce spending and not hand out goodies, is about 40 members. Period. You maybe got 20 in the House or in the Senate, maybe. It's really tough. And so Mitch McConnell's trying to hold together somebody like a Jeff Sessions and somebody like a Susan Collins who aren't on the same page. And so there is a broader context and process. And that's the reason I don't hate Mitch McConnell. Now that I kind of understand the bigger context, yeah, it frustrated me that he was saying we couldn't do conservative things because the answer is we didn't have enough conservatives. So the real key is figuring out how to find fiscally conservative candidates who reduce the size and scope of the federal government, help them win primaries, and then help them win general elections. That's it. That's how this works. That's how America's set up. And so that's a huge problem. Right now, we just don't have the numbers of conservatives that we think they do. They're just not there. James, tell me what you got.
Hey, Cameron, man, and by no means am I educated on this at all. And, I mean, I think you're, probably definitely more educated than all of us listeners. So I'd love to have, like, a back and forth here so
Sure.
You can educate me and everybody else. I mean, I just think that Trump started this awakening kind of sort of thing. And I'm not a Trump,
Sure.
like huge Trump supporter or anything like that, but I figure he's kind of set like a mindset out here that, hey, we should expect more from people.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's enough people out there realizing that. And I feel like that, Matt Gaetz, hopped on the bandwagon there and pretty much tried to, just chariot that particular theme, even though he may not believe it or not. But the country believes it. All the Republicans, conservatives or whatever, they believe it.
Believe
so
what?
I think believe that the mindset needs to change, that we can't, it just got to go, like I was mentioning in the text, it can't just go business as usual. We got to, go through all the normal steps to, get the money, to get the candidates, to get whatever. It's I don't think people are hearing us on the top end, and I think that until they hear us, that we're going to keep losing as a conservative Republican Party. We're just going to keep going in the negative because there's no mindset change on the top, from, they're not listening to their constituents. So I just think that we're going to continue to lose
but
numbers
hang on,
in the
hang
House.
on. I hear you, but let's just take the McCarthy thing, for example. The vast majority of folks that represent the vast majority of Republicans in the House, including Donald Trump, by the way, said this whole thing is a distraction that gives the ball to Democrats. Eight Republicans sided with all the Democrats, and so who's not listening?
So that's a side point, in my opinion, that it's obviously going to always give power to Democrats if there's any kind of controversy. So at that point, I don't think it's, that's null and void.
No, it's not, James.
I don't think a lot of people even knew what you mentioned about Trump. I didn't know that about Trump, that he passed these CRs and omnibuses and everything else.
Yeah.
But I don't think that changes people's mindset about what they expect now, knowing that, I think there's more of an awakening, like I said, that the government is like just messing with us. More people care, more people know, but it's not changing on the top end.
But how do you change it? Like, that's my question to you, is the only way I know how to change it is to win elections and have the votes, because that's how our government works. How else would you suggest we change it?
Well, we got to stand behind the people that actually, want to speak up and change their mind. So like Senator Republican or Representative Burchett, he was very much, I think, in that McCarthy club. Best friends with him, probably going on trips with him, being invited to parties and dinners and everything else. But there was enough people, and I even give credit to Matt Murphy for, I think, digging at him a little bit, that just kind of tell these guys, hey, you know what, you need to start listening to your conscience instead of what you think is right, because, and even he said, he took the bullet for other representatives so they didn't have to say it. They didn't have to go against McCarthy. I feel like there's so many more people.
They could have. They didn't.
Their mindset hasn't changed. So I think that we need to keep saying, as the people that are voting these people in, say, hey, we expect more of you. Let's get the people that normally can't call into a talk show 9 to 5.
But what's the win? What do we get? What do we get for it, James? Like, let's say that they actually do represent the majority. That's demonstrably false. They don't. But let's say they did. What do we get for kicking McCarthy out? I'm not a huge McCarthy fan, but let's change it to Jim Jordan. What do we get now that we didn't have?
It's not the point of kicking McCarthy out or having a new guy in. It's as much as empowering these people that are too weaselly or too cowardness to go against the grain because they just want to be part of the club. Like either convince them to change their mind, help them pull at their heartstrings and their conscience, like Representative Burchett, or vote them out and replace them with somebody that's got a conscience. I mean, but Burchett
empowered Democrats. That's what he did.
Yeah, in the past.
Right now.
Because that goes back to my current other point there, was that no matter what we do, if we're losing, if we're giving them a talking point, we're empowering Democrats. I mean, you can't change that.
No. You voted with them and gave them the floor. Like 8 plus plus Democrats is a majority. So by definition, those 8 gave Democrats the ability to decide the outcome of the vote.
Well, I mean, like I said, but if you had enough people like Representative Burchett, we got to hold these people accountable. We got to have the normal, everyday working Joes and Janes to call up and be like, hey, call your senator, call the offices and stuff, and say, hey, you guys got to start figuring this stuff out because we're tired of it.
But I hear you. But you're saying we've got to basically throw out the other 200 or so Republican representatives to get where we want to go. And I'm saying, well, what if it's that's where the voters actually want people to be and the 8 are wrong?
Well, I think that we are both. Well, I think the majority of people, including yourself and me, by hearing this record, we're assuming that these people, because of their past records, I'm sure Representative Burchett, didn't always vote. I'm sure he voted for an omnibus bill or CR or did something that sided that that went with the majority too. I mean, we're just assuming by these guys' old voting records that they would never change. I mean, it's possible to teach an old dog new tricks, but we gotta help push that along, either by calling in and trying to affect change. and not being complacent and just hoping that the Republican Party has our best interests
So-
at heart, because evidently they don't.
And maybe that's true, and I'm willing to hear, James. I mean, in terms of, when's the last time that you called your federal representatives, senators, or somebody like that, and said you don't spend a dime over what we take in taxes?
Yeah, I mean, I did it after Matt Murphy had a conversation with Representative Burchett, and somebody gave it McCarthy's number. I actually live in South Carolina. I'm a longtime resident of Tennessee. Lewisburg. I grew up in Lewisburg and Fayetteville and places like that. So, but I called that day. I got so on fire that I called my representative in South Carolina here, and left a message for him saying, "Hey, you guys got you stand with these 8 guys, and let's change this."
Yeah.
And I called McCarthy's office too. So I mean, it's just enough people are taking time out of their day. I just feel like the mindset has changed from the top end, and the only way we can do that is either vote them out or let them know that they got to have the daggum C.O. Jones and in the words of Phil Valentine to stand up and do something like Senator Burchett. I mean, it's obvious there's other people out there that wanted to vote McCarthy out or to get a change, to change the pace up there, but they just weren't. They weren't brave enough to do it, and Representative Burchett said that. He said that.
But what if they said they were listening to their constituents? Is that okay?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on if they actually were or not.
But I'm just assuming. So we should throw them out. We should. I mean, if they're not listening to us, we should throw them out. And if they are, and maybe those 8, they thought they were listening to their constituents. I mean, maybe the majority of Republicans looks at them and says, maybe we should find somebody to throw you out.
Well, that's maybe the case, but I'm saying, how many people have actually stepped up and called their representatives?
I agree.
Are they honestly just playing along to get along, to be a part of the club up there? Is that the 200-something votes that you're referencing? The majority of the Republican, quote-unquote Republican Party, are they actually up there to be a part of the club, or are they up there to represent us? And how if at all, have us as the people inform these representatives that, hey, we want change. I think we're just too busy living our 9 to 5 and hoping that they have our best interest at heart.
Yeah.
That something's got to change, because I think we're doing it, like I mentioned at the beginning of the call. We're just going to keep losing. I feel like we're going to keep losing House seats, Senate seats, until the people at the top realize that there's a mindset change happening at the base, and we're just not going to support their candidates, just because they have special interests or whatever, and they're going to keep losing until they change their mindset.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know, because they'll give us a choice, Cameron. Like on the ballot, they'll get their candidate in there, and at the end of the day, it's voting an R or a D. And of course we're going to vote R because we don't want a D in there.
Yeah.
But all you're doing by doing that is just losing interest by the people that are wanting to vote for someone they believe in. And if you just give them somebody, then there's no passion there. There's no anything that you can do with that.
Hey, well, James, I appreciate the call, man. I got to head for a break, but that's the real deal, and I really do appreciate it. I think James is on to something. That if the people don't care, if the people aren't holding their representatives accountable, then we've got a huge problem in America. The flip side of that is suggesting that 8 members of Congress speak for more Republicans than the other 200 plus. Because it's entirely possible that other constituents look at their members and say, yeah, if you voted with those 8, I'd vote you out because it's a distraction and you're handing the ball to Democrats. Some folks say, hey, no, we feel more of y'all should have sided with the Democrats and cast McCarthy out and stop this stupid spending. That's how we sort this stuff out. And I'm looking at the actual votes. I'm looking at what's actually there, not how I feel about it. I don't want $33 trillion in debt. I think they spend like they're drunk. But the question is, are my representatives, Andy Ogles, Bill Hagerty, Marsha Blackburn, are they supporting these CRs and omnibus bills? Or are they not? Is it tactically the right move? Or are they moving us in a conservative direction? Or are they ensuring that Democrats can keep blowing out the budget? That's a fair question. That's what we got to deal with. We got to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt Murphy on The Matt Murphy Show on SuperDoc 99.7.
Hey folks, Paul Winkler here. One of the things that we see from time to time, well, way too often, is this. Let's say that you go to a financial advisor and they say, hey, you need to set up an investment portfolio, and what we need to do is we need to have some of your money in stocks or mutual funds or ETFs or something like that, and we need to have something fixed or guaranteed in your investment portfolio that'll protect you against the market downturns. And quite often what they're talking about, they may not use this word, but often what they're talking about is putting your money into some sort of an annuity, like an indexed annuity or something like that, or a fixed annuity. And what they're doing is they're saying, hey, let's put your money in both of these, which sounds really good. And you should. And typically in an investment portfolio, you do want to have fixed investments and stocks as well in the portfolio to protect against inflation. But here's what happens when you manage a portfolio. Let me use a really, really simple example. Let's say I have a portfolio and I got stocks in there. Then I have my fixed income, my bonds in the portfolio as well. And let's say I have half my money in each. When stocks really do well, what we want to do is they're going to be overweighted in my portfolio. I own too much of them because they've done well compared to bonds. It was supposed to be half and half, and now maybe it's 70% stocks and 30% bonds, let's say, or something like that. So I want to sell some of this and buy some of that to bring it back to 50-50 and back and forth throughout time. Well, the problem is when you're managing a portfolio and rebalancing in that way, bringing it back to the original portfolio mix of half and half in my example, I'm going to have to incur a trading cost or a commission or a back-end surrender with the annuity. It doesn't make any sense to use that product in this particular manner. Why do people do it? Well, the reason quite often is this. Commissions are very high with these products. And a lot of firms, they actually require their advisors to recommend a certain amount of annuities for every person that walks in the door. Now, typically annuities are used for a different purpose. They were actually designed for a totally different purpose. And that was distribution toward the end of life. When somebody looks like they're going to run out of money, they're annuitized. Now, let me tell you something. One study showed there was only like 5% of annuities are ever used in that fashion. Most often they're sold as an accumulation vehicle like this, and they were never really designed for that purpose. If you want to learn more, call us for a free 15-minute phone call or go to our website, paulwinkler.com. The number 615-851-1950 or paulwinkler.com. We don't do anything on commission, and we like to rail against these types of things and help investors do what is in their best interest. paulwinkler.com.
Welcome back. Man, I'm loving what's happening on the Super Talk text line, 615-737-9986. You guys are lighting it up, and I've got callers on the line. We'll talk to you guys, too. I don't want to get into a conversation, hit the hard break at the hour, and cut you off. So we'll pick you up on the other side if y'all are able to hang out. What I'm going to ask you guys, because I see several of y'all saying McCarthy's a liar and he deserved it and everybody else deserved the same. Okay, I hear you. So when 8 swing state Democrats or swing state Republicans, they're ones that have tough re-election races, vote with all the Democrats to throw out Speaker Jordan because he refuses to pass legislation that can keep the government open, then what? Are we going to, should they be removed for the Republican conference? Or do we say, well, look, the 8 right there, they're representing the interest of their constituents, and so it's totally fine. Is that cool? If you guys are going to say that's cool, then we can say 8 siding with Democrats to kick out McCarthy's cool. Because we need to be consistent, right? Same deal for Jordan. He passes a CR, or an omnibus, which I can tell you is a virtual certainty. I've already pledged if they manage to pass and enact all the 12 appropriations bills independently in the way that Matt Gaetz said he wanted, I will literally eat the cover page to an appropriations bill. I will literally do that. I will put it in my mouth and chew it because we're going to have a CR, and then you guys say we got to kick Jordan out or we got to kick Scalise out. Help me understand, because I need to have it. Let's keep it live. We got 2 more hours to go. I'm Cameron Smith, and you're listening to The Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7.
Lower inflation.
The Federal Reserve has been trying to cool down job growth and cool down wage growth as part of this interest rate raising campaign they've been on for the past 14 to 15 months. It is not working in the labor sector when you have job gains this strong.
It is the final day this week of the largest union healthcare workers strike in the U.S. 75,000 Kaiser Permanente nurses and medical specialists on the picket lines. Union officials warning if talks over pay raises and staffing shortages don't progress, they could strike again in November. And United Auto Workers are heading into a 4th week of the targeted strike against GM, Stellantis, and Ford. UAW leaders have received a comprehensive package from Ford and will hold a briefing this afternoon. You're listening to ABC News.
Embarrassed?
Welcome back. You guys have energized me on this Friday. I'm getting fired up. I love it. Super Talk text line 615-737-9986. Text or call. I see on the Super Text line this notion of we have to stop the Republican infighting. And I think that's fair. So if you disagree with me, you should stop. Wait a minute. I actually think it's good. I think Republicans should work through these things. I think Kevin McCarthy's fatal flaw is he was an accommodating baby. He was, oh, what do you want? You mean there's only 8 of you and I need you? Everything you want, you can have. Let's ignore these other members over here who are already working together. But you 8, you get what you want. I've worked with speakers across the country at the state level. You can look at Speaker Boehner, Speaker Ryan. You know who was one of the best speakers from a purely operational standpoint? Nancy Pelosi. I disagreed with almost everything she put forth. Her policies were terrible, but she knew how to keep folks together to move her agenda and take the country left. And the goal is to keep Republicans together and take the country right. So guess what? Whether it's Jordan or Scalise or whoever it is, this idea that we can vacate the chair whenever we feel like it because there are 8 of us, I'd tell them, here's the deal. You so much as threaten that again. You so much as threaten that again. We'll cut you. We will boot you from the House Republican Conference. We will cut you off politically, and we will find the best primary challenger in America to run you out of office. Oh, and I know that's hurtful, but that's how hardball politics work. That's what a good speaker does, because a good speaker says, I don't care about my own feelings. I care about moving the country in a more conservative direction, consistent with what a majority of Republicans want. More secure borders, reduce spending, justice that's actually blind. Yeah, you know, we actually are on the same page. We just disagree on the how. Yes, somebody on the Super Talk text line said Pelosi did that because she was ruthless. And guess what? She dragged the country to the left. What do you want? To feel better or have a more conservative country? What's more important to you? You want to agree? You want somebody to tell you you're super smart and all the things that you feel are good? Or do you want less spending? You want to break the back of the federal bureaucracy? Which is it? Because those are 2 very different paths. We've got Danny for Lebanon. Wants to talk about Trump. Danny, what you got? Danny, are you there? Nope. I think we lost Danny. Well, let's go to Susan out of Tullahoma and see if I can get Susan. Susan, can you hear me? Well, we'll have to work with Mason. I'm going to put Susan back on hold. Sorry, Susan. We'll figure it out. We're having technical difficulties that we'll address during the break. Whoa. Now, this is it. And I get this. Now, wow, that's exactly the stinky attitude I can't stomach from you. What's stinky? What's stinky? Actually wanting us to move in a conservative direction? That's stinky? What do you want? Y'all are talking about revolution. Y'all want to change the game. You want to do it differently? Let's. Because I actually don't believe that. I don't believe you want that. I believe you want to talk about it and you want to have your ears tickled in a way that makes you feel better about what's happening. Let's talk about facts. We want to talk about what actually happened. Because we were talking about fiscal conservative ideas, shrinking government, reducing the stupid spending so we can get the debt under control. We can't get the debt under control until you get the deficits under control. So deficits are what you do in a year, and then the accumulation of that gives you your debt. Let's go through some facts because y'all want accountability. And I'm, again, fine, kick McCarthy out, whoever the next guy is, whatever. But if we're going to do accountability, let's be consistent because we're fiscal conservatives and we care about moving it in the right direction. When President Trump entered the Oval Office, CBO projected the cumulative 2017 to 2027 budget deficits would be $10 trillion. When he left 4 years later, over the same time period, deficits were projected at $13.9 trillion. That's $3.9 trillion in additional deficit spending. I can go down the list of the continuing resolutions and omnibuses that Trump signed that resulted in the deficits during his administration. Let's do it in context. President Trump signed legislation and approved executive actions costing $7.8 trillion over a 10-year period, compared to $5 trillion for President Obama and $6.9 trillion for President Bush. And Trump enacted these costs in one 4-year term as opposed to 8 for Bush and Obama. But we want accountability for fiscal conservatism, right? That's what we want. So this, to me, is where I don't know that we're being consistent. Trump left the White House with the largest peacetime budget deficit in American history and national debt exceeding 100% of the economy for the first time since World War II. Facts. Now, you can tell me, well, Cameron, I like it. I like Trump. I liked him. He's great. Your facts don't matter. Okay. I see somebody saying, that's why I roll with DeSantis. Amen. But my point is we got to be consistent. If we're going to toss out the members of Congress that are voting for continuing resolutions and omnibus spending bills that have a lot of junk in them, let's do it. But let's be consistent. If you're telling me, and to Trump's credit, he said, hey, I'm not really a fiscal conservative. He said that publicly. But a lot of y'all who I recognize on this Super Talk text line are telling me, I love Trump, but man, we got to be fiscally conservative. Well, which is it? Which is it? I know that's uncomfortable, but which is it? I'm with you. I'm a fiscal conservative. I don't want Andy Ogles, who's my representative, to vote for deficit spending. Just don't. And then Andy's going to come back to me and say, well, I don't want to, but the other option is to shut down the government, to which I, because I'm a reasonable human being, will say, okay, well, what can we get to move us in a more conservative direction, since we sure as heck aren't getting a balanced budget? Okay, we're going to get some spending concessions that move us to 70% of our pre-COVID spending level. Well, that's gross. It's kind of like kissing your sister, but hey, I guess it's a win. I guess it's a win. And I want to be fair. I mean, Trump did have COVID at the end of his administration, and they just blew money out the door. So are we going to say, well, yeah, they had to do that. They had to blow the money out the door. I don't know. A lot of you guys agreed with me when it was, hey, this doesn't seem real responsible to just be handing out checks to folks who didn't necessarily have any economic hardship because of COVID. But now I'm seeing you tell me it's fine. You know, that he had to do that. There was nothing. Really? That's not what you said previously. And I want us to pull back, but we got to know how. And I'm going to keep asking you the same question. I know you don't like to hear it, but how? How do we move the country in a more conservative direction? Well, we need this. We need this. This is part of the problem. Well, okay, tell me the problem and what we need. How do we get to what we need? You tell me your policy, the one that you like. A balanced budget is a great one. How do we get there? Well, if these guys would just know what's good for them and know, we'll get it. No, you won't. Votes aren't there. They're just not. You've got to be able to win elections. So when you're running bad candidates, here's a good example. What takes you in a more conservative direction? A Dr. Oz losing after winning the primary to a John Fetterman, or somebody who's a little bit more what you might call a rhino or call an establishment or call a rank and file Republican who's a vote in the Senate? Which is it? How about in Georgia? Is it better to recruit somebody like Brian Kemp, who just outright opposed Trump and won, and say, hey, let's get a candidate like him in the Senate? Or is it a Herschel Walker who lost? Because, I don't know, those two Senate seats might make kind of a difference in our spending levels and whether we're conservative or not. And that's the truth. That's how this works. And so I get it. I get the frustration. And then telling me, well, we don't have time for that. We don't have time for majority. No, we do. Either that or you don't respect the Constitution. You don't respect the Constitution's prescriptions for how we solve issues. And I get it. Nobody wants to wait. It's taken us decades to get to $33 trillion in debt. It's going to take us decades to go in the other direction. Let me check with Mason over the break. We'll get there in a couple minutes. We'll take a break, and we'll figure out why I can't hear you guys on the phone, because I'm going to you, and then nobody's there, and so we'll figure that out. The issue we have to figure out how to get to where we want to go. And I think there's a lot of agreement on that. I mean, on this station, I know you guys don't see it, but on the Super Talk text line, it is hilarious because the folks who love Chris Hand think I'm a weirdo. The folks who love me think Chris is weirdo. Everyone thinks Matt Murphy's a weirdo. I kid. Matt's more libertarian, right? Chris is kind of MAGA land. I'm in political pragmatist land. He's got that libertarian streak that's like, who can I disagree with that results in less government anything? And I think it's good because that's the coalition. That's who you got to bring together to beat the Democrats. But if we don't do that, if we just say, you must all sign on to one version of this, Republicans are going to get split like they did with the McCarthy vote. And again, I don't care. I actually would love Scalise in. Love a Southern speaker. I think that would be great for the South. I actually am fine with Jim Jordan. I think Chairman Jordan has been putting the screws to folks in judiciary, and I think he's done a good job, and I think his colleagues recognize that. So either one's fine with me, and either one's more conservative than Kevin McCarthy. I just wonder if we're going to kick him out when they enact a CR. I just wonder if we're going to tell him, hey, you know what? We love you, but no, because 8 of us decided you can't be here anymore. And then when the speaker is Hakeem Jeffries in the next Congress because we lost, then it will be, well, we didn't lose because we shut things down and kept kicking out speakers. We lost because people weren't conservative enough. And so we always, Republicans have a bad habit of redefining winning. We lose and then we say we won, but we make excuses. Man, I know you guys out there on Saturdays cheering on your football team. None of you Vols fans out there want a Butch Jones Life Championship. You want a national championship. You want to win where it matters. So do I. I don't want I don't want the consolation prize of, well, we got to win because we feel better. We feel like somebody told us what we wanted to hear. I want to win on the issues where it matters. The job in the Congress is to either enact conservative legislation or not. What you talk about, your big talk, your media interviews, none of that matters. It's how you vote, what you do, period. That's the job. So if you try to suggest to folks that really my job is to just make you feel good about the things I say, well, now you know why we have a problem. Because so many of us hear politicians in town halls, they talk good talk, and then they vote for the CRs and omnibus spending. They drag us down a wasteful road. But don't worry, they come home and they tell us, look at the other guy. Look at Joe Biden, how it's weekend at Bernie's. He's terrible. He's bad. Hunter Biden's bad. All these folks are bad. But just don't look at me and don't look at how I vote and what I do. Because then, as James, who called in, said, we might actually change things because we might actually hold people accountable, and we look at the facts and we say, wait a minute, you haven't been particularly conservative. You haven't done the things that we wanted. Now we're talking revolution. Now we're talking change. And now we're talking that we need to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt Murphy on The Matt Murphy Show. Welcome back. I appreciate you guys. Super Talk text line 615-737-9986. I get the frustration. I sense it. Tell me how we get where we're going to go. I think we have the phones worked out. So, Susan, you have been the most patient. I'm coming to you. Tell me what you got about the speaker.
Okay, well, hello.
I hear you.
I first of all, I don't really care who the speaker is, but whoever it is, they need to be able to unite this party of ours and hurting the stray cats, because we're not going to get anywhere if that doesn't happen. And I think they need to adopt what Nancy Pelosi did, was change the rules so one person can't motion to vacate the chair, because you're not going to please your whole caucus, okay, when they're not all some are moderates, some are conservatives. You're not going to please them all the time. So you can't.
Can the next speaker go to Democrats to get that rule change, or is that not allowed?
What's that?
Can the next speaker ask Democrats to help?
I don't know. I don't know about that. So.
Well, you get a choice. So if those 8 say, no, we want the ability to do this again, then you don't have the vote. So either you got to get Democrats to vote for that rule change, or it doesn't happen. So which is it?
Well, I would probably get try to get some Democrats on board. I mean, fair. I thought we were supposed to work. I thought we were supposed to work together.
I agree. I think you're right, Susan. I mean, I think that you're right, and I appreciate the call. I think Susan's spot on about needing to get folks together. The problem is you've got a small contingency that says, absolutely not. I'm going to get what I want for me because this is what I think my constituents want. So the other 200 plus of you who are doing what you think your constituents want can go pound sand. I think that's insane. That's the tail wagging the dog. And this is and I got a column coming out over at the Tennessean about this. This myth of the 8-member conservative majority. Like, I get it. We're in Tennessee. We're in the South. You can be conservatives you want to be and you win, right? The majority in the House and the Senate is decided on the margin. It's decided in general elections. You know what? Gloria Johnson's running against Marsha Blackburn. Marsha Blackburn is going to set her on fire. It's not going to be close. You know why? Because it's the primary that matters. Tennessee's a Republican state, but the majority of the House and the Senate go through swing districts. So the stuff that you guys are saying, it plays great in Tennessee. Shut it down. Okay, cool. Like, that's not going to hurt Andy Ogles or Tim Burchett or Blackburn or Haggerty. Like, okay. Like, most voters are going to look at that and say, fine. But what about Ohio? What about Arizona? What about Pennsylvania? Let me tell you as a secret. Voters in those swing independents that give you the majority or not, they don't like the shutdown politics. Now, they'd be fine with spending less money. But this idea of we're just going to shut it down, we don't care, their rationale is, well, then why would I vote for you to represent me in government? And so it's not about what, a dyed-in-the-wool, deep red state wants. And I hear it. It's like, why should those guys get to decide? Because that's how we do it. It's math. And we're a pretty divided country. And so that's kind of what we're up against. And we don't have to like it. I've got Mike in the borough wants to talk Trump. Mike, what you got?
Hey, Cameron. How are you doing, buddy?
Doing well.
Good. Well, appreciate you filling in today, but I swear, all I hear you say is things that are not totally true.
What have I said that's not true?
None of the 8 said they wanted to shut down the government.
No. That's not what I'm asking about.
They want to shut down the government, huh?
I never said that the 8 said they wanted to shut down government. They tossed out McCarthy.
You got through saying. They say they want to shut down the government. It's okay.
They wanted to cut out McCarthy.
Said that. Well, now McCarthy, basically, what their whole purpose was, and I tell you, it takes a lot of bravery for 8 people to stand up and say, hey, what is best for the country? The bottom line is this. They keep doing the same thing. And then you've got Rick Scott basically had 20 senators send a letter to Schumer telling him, don't take a 2-week vacation. Let's stay here. What's going to happen if you didn't change it? McCarthy, and I like Kevin. I think he's an okay guy, but bottom line is unless this country is willing to say, hey.
So what changes? What did you get for this?
What
do you get?
Bottom line is you're going to have to – it takes character. And the thing about it is the change, the other side's not offering anything.
So my representative, Andy Ogles, has no character because he said he didn't want the distraction and didn't vote to boot McCarthy out.
No, I didn't say that.
Well, so the 200 plus that voted to not have the distraction, you're telling me that they don't have courage because the 8 had courage to side with the Democrats. That's what I'm hearing you say.
They didn't side with the Democrats. The Democrats sided with them. The Democrats didn't vote with the 8. They voted on their own.
They did. The vote counts the vote count is there. It is a public record. You can go look with it. It's all the Democrats and 8 Republicans.
They did not vote with the 8.
Did they vote the same way? Yes or no?
Well, the vote wound up, but that was not their intent. That was not
their intent. That's not honest. They wanted to kick McCarthy out, and so they sided with the Democrats. That's what the vote count says.
If it had been Scalise or if it had been Jordan, do you think they would have voted the same way?
No, but what if it's 8 moderate Democrats who say, we don't like Jordan anymore, we want to boot him? Then what?
Guess what? Bring it on, because the Democrats go not do it. They're so controlled by Schumer and Pelosi and that group up there. They never have courage to stand up and say what the truth is.
Yeah, I agree. Democrats don't care about political extremism. They could have just said, we don't want this distraction either. We'll have 10 of us vote, with the rest of the Republicans, and then we're not having this conversation. I agree with you there, but the idea of giving the floor to the Democrats, that's not courage. That's nuts.
Well, let me ask you this. What is going to wind up, how are we going to break the mode of pushing everything off to the end and have a CR or, an omnibus bill unless you say, hey, this is the breaking the line sand. I know they talked about all the things about Ukraine money. The Democrats aren't going to do anything like that. And we passed a bill the last time.
Hey, Mike, we got to take a break real quick. I'm going to put you on hold, and I'll come back to you after the break. Can we do that? Cool. We will come back to Mike after the break. I'm Cameron Smith, and this is the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7. All right, we're back. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt Murphy. We're going to get to Mike just a second. Mike, we got to wrap it up. We got a lot of people on the line that want to talk, super text line. So we'll get back quickly to Mike. Mike, you're back on the air. Tell me sort of okay, here's what we need to do going forward.
Well, Cameron, I guess I'll preface it by saying this. I also want to I've been praying for Matt and his family. I know that gentleman down in North Alabama, he was very close. Was very close to, and
yep.
Just want to let him know, thinking about him, keeping him in my prayers during this time of his loss.
Yeah.
My thing is that just let the truth be the truth, not somebody's opinion.
Amen.
And if we can do that, because we know that you made a comment earlier about the Pennsylvania election and the Georgia election. Of course, there's 5 states. We can always go back and look at the things that happened back in the 2020 election, and a lot of things didn't go right. But
yep.
When I say right, I mean the votes were counted. We just don't know if they were legitimate votes or not. My main thing is, like you said, we're 34 trillion, and a T is a whole lot bigger than a B, which is a lot bigger than an M.
Yep,
but we can't keep going, and unless we get serious and say, "Hey guys, we got to make cuts everywhere." Unless you can get that, and you have the 12 spending bills and address them and have debate on them, instead of just pushing the envelope down, where you can say, "Hey, we got to pass this, or the government's going to shut down." Well, see, that's a falsehood too, because I think it's 78 or 82% of all bills will still be paid, and every time that's happened, all the guys that missed a paycheck, they got it back. So but the only way you can get somebody's attention and because the media is not going to cover it correctly, but you have to have courage and you have to have the willingness to stand up to say, "Hey, I got to do this for the future, not for my re-election time frame, but for the future."
Yeah.
I'm going to get off the phone. I'm fixing to pull back in. I just want to say thank you for taking my phone call, and I hope you have a blessed weekend.
You too, Mike. Guys, we can disagree on this stuff, but my exchange with Mike, both of us are passionate. Where I'm asking tough questions. He's like pushing back. That's great. That's how we do this, right? That's what makes it work. When it's, I'm going to take my ball and go home because you said something I don't like. That's how Democrats behave. Don't do that. I mean, I'm learning from you guys. I'm understanding where you are. I can feel the frustration. I've felt that way for years. But getting serious. We say, we got to get serious. Okay, Mike's right. We got to win elections. The numbers aren't there. That's the truth. Because the only other option here is you say, well, we just don't like the setup from the Constitution. We don't like this idea that you have to have a majority to advance your ideas. I support the Constitution. So you got to have a majority to advance your ideas. And I understand the frustration that a lot of conservative ideas seem like common sense. It's, well, we shouldn't spend money we don't have. When people are crossing the border, some of them are on the terrorist watch list. We should probably secure that border. I mean, who opposes that? Well, the answer is a lot of folks in Washington who were sent there by people in other parts of the country. And we got to win elections in those parts of the country. It's a game changer if we win in Georgia in the Senate and we win in Pennsylvania in the Senate. Game changer. If that red wave that didn't come in the House is there and we have a bigger margin, this is a moot point. Doesn't matter. And we're advancing conservative legislation. And so where I disagree with Mike adamantly is he said, well, we're not sure if they were legitimate votes. Well, guess what? In a lot of states around the country in those congressional elections, we sure like the fact that Republicans won. And we said those were legitimate. So those have been litigated. That's there. We've had an intervening midterm. This idea that when we don't win, we call the vote into question, that's bull. We need to stop that. Now, COVID was weird, but we're past COVID. Republicans passed a lot of legislation around the country strengthening elections. Now we got to win them. That's where we need to be, and that is hard work. That's knocking on doors. That's saying, okay, this candidate I like has got a tough race. I'm going to go knock on doors for him. I'm going to go do what I have to do to make sure my neighbors know about it and they get out and vote. I mean, that's what that looks like. Let's see. I've got Betty from Nashville wants to talk about Trump. Betty, what you got?
Especially this right here.
Betty,
that was just because but this because I really appreciate the time.
Betty, what you got?
You take care.
Betty's
know.
got guest over.
Yes, please.
Betty,
You're welcome.
you take care of your guest, Betty. I'm going to let Betty take care of her guest. I don't want to interrupt there. I want to talk to David in Rock Island. He says, speaker disagree. David, what you got?
Yeah, thank you for taking my call.
Absolutely.
I think Cameron
Yep.
McCarthy, Kevin McCarthy was wrong. He has one job to do, pass the budget.
Yep.
He didn't do that, and he deserves what he got. I support Matt Gaetz and the other 7 conservative Republicans that.
Do you support Donald Trump signing deficit spending bills and CRs and omnibus bills? Do you support that?
I disagree with it.
Okay, but not enough to not vote for Trump, right? You can still vote for him, right?
Yes, I can.
All right, but you can't do that for Kevin McCarthy, but you can do that for Donald Trump.
Kevin McCarthy had one job.
Right.
And he didn't do it. He couldn't pull together a coalition to pass the budget.
So if we have another CR, are we going to vote that guy out too?
If that's what it takes.
To do what?
I hear people talking about how Reagan said, well, if we get 85% of something, that we're doing good. Well, Reagan got taken to the cleaners by Tip O'Neill. And
David, that's just insane. The 1986 tax reform that Reagan did with O'Neill was one of the biggest tax realignments in American history. So that's what getting taken to the cleaners looks like. Take me to the cleaners.
Well, he also got taken to the cleaners on the border. He
sure
had them agree to
an amnesty. I mean, yeah, I hear you on that, but it's by historical numbers. What we have now flowing through the border is way worse than what we had under Reagan.
Yeah, and
so again, I like the cleaners under Reagan.
If Tip O'Neill had provided the funding that he was supposed to stop the border crossings, we probably wouldn't be having the problem we're having now. But he went along with Reagan and said, "Yeah, we'll do this," but he never appropriated the funds to stop the border crossings.
Reagan also was able to unite the country.
Yes, he was.
He did that in a way nobody's been able to do it since. David, thank you for the call. I appreciate it. I don't think Reagan got taken to the cleaners. Reagan ushered in an era of prosperity for America. Navigated the Cold War. I mean, I'm not saying Reagan's gone. We got to figure out something else, but I think his track record was pretty decent. So, maybe that's just me. I think we have time for one more. Andrew from Nashville, National Debt. What you got?
Hey, I bet your job feels like you're trying to play Pictionary with blind people sometimes. But anyway, so the National Debt, I disciple and I mentor a lot of high school kids. And last night I had one over and he wanted to discuss the National Debt. And I tried to give him an analogy, like maybe you're the king of Tennessee and everybody pays you $10 million a year and you spend $15 million a year. And he said, he came to the conclusion, who do we owe back this $34 trillion? And I said, that's why groceries are so high, bro. That's why everything is so high. That's why, and I couldn't really give him an exact answer. Who do we owe back this $34 trillion?
So
it's ourselves, right?
No, there's a couple different bins. We've got IOUs to Social Security. That's debt we owe ourselves. We owe ourselves trillions because we basically give Social Security IOUs. When you talk about the national debt, it's split between internal and external. And externally, it's countries like China, Brazil. You can go down the list. Anybody can buy U.S. debt in terms of T-bills and stuff like that.
Understood. So that's why China has a little bit of a lien on us, right? We owe them money.
We do. And the bigger issue is that between the way the Fed Reserve works and between congressional spending, we flooded the market with dollars. when we were throwing out all those checks. You want to know why groceries are so expensive? It's because we threw out all these checks. We created all this fake demand in the system, and then the prices went up because we put fake dollars in there. I mean, it's pretty simple, but that's what inflation had. That's what causes inflation. And if you want to reduce inflation, you got to take money out of the system. That's what the Fed's doing with interest rates and things like that. And it's painful to go the other way.
What's the end game here? When does the bubble burst, and what happens in your mind?
I think we're going to see something interesting here, particularly with commercial real estate. We've got a lot of people holding commercial real estate that folks have not gone back to the workplace. They are remote. And so you got all these buildings in all these big cities that are extremely expensive assets that aren't generating income. And when you move to sell and refinance or do stuff like that, you start to get these things upside down. And so I think
a depression, right?
I think we're looking at a recession. The Fed is trying to manage us away from that, but I just don't know if they've got enough tools to ultimately do it. I'm not doom and gloom, but this idea of, well, there's just going to be this easy landing and then it'll be fine. Well, go to the grocery. Go try to buy a house. Like, it's not an easy landing if you're trying to do those things. And I think there's some more economic dominoes to fall. So, hey, if you're in a position where you have a job and you've generated some cash, finding some stable sources to put those in right now, you can look at some of the basically really safe cash equivalents that are giving you 5 and 6%. I mean, that's kind of cool and that's pretty safe, but I don't think we're out of the woods yet. That's my answer to your question.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the call. I think the issue here is we need to focus on what we actually want, what the win looks like. If we want to move inflation down, well, what are the policies that we can enact that actually address that? How are we going to pull money out of the economy? How are we going to get the economy moving so that it just grows and then we can get in a better situation? How are we going to do those things, and what do the votes look like and how we do it? Because I get all the shutdown people that say, well, just shut it down, shut it down. Well, okay, not politically viable in swing districts. You end up giving Democrats the controls and then they blow it out again. So that didn't work. It won't work. I've seen that historically. Okay, well, then we reduce spending. Okay, but in order to reduce spending, you have to have majorities to pass legislation. And so this goes back to my point. How do you win? How do you win in races? I'll give you 2 examples in Alabama. Under the Voting Rights Act, they just had a redistricting. Now they've got 2 50% black voting age population districts, more or less. Well, are you going to put somebody that you'd call a moderate or a rhino up in one of those districts so maybe they win, or are you just going to lose that and let a Democrat pick up a seat? Are you going to say, hey, this person, it's better to have them on my team and have a big team than act like a purist and have a Democratic majority? I know that's uncomfortable, but that's the truth. We got to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt Murphy on Super Talk 99.7.
Hey folks, Paul Winkler here. One of the things that we see from time to time, well, way too often, is this. Let's say that you go to a financial advisor and they say, hey, you need to set up an investment portfolio, and what we need to do is we need to have some of your money in stocks or mutual funds or ETFs or something like that, and we need to have something fixed or guaranteed in your investment portfolio that'll protect you against the market downturns. And quite often what they're talking about, they may not use this word, but often what they're talking about is putting your money into some sort of an annuity, like an indexed annuity or something like that, or a fixed annuity. And what they're doing is they're saying, hey, let's put your money in both of these, which sounds really good. And you should. And typically in an investment portfolio, you do want to have fixed investments and stocks as well in the portfolio to protect against inflation. But here's what happens when you manage a portfolio. Let me use a really, really simple example. Let's say I have a portfolio and I got stocks in there. Then I have my fixed income, my bonds in the portfolio as well. And let's say I have half my money in each. When stocks really do well, what we want to do is they're going to be overweighted in my portfolio. I own too much of them because they've done well compared to bonds. It was supposed to be half and half, and now maybe it's 70% stocks and 30% bonds, let's say, or something like that. So I want to sell some of this and buy some of that to bring it back to 50-50 and back and forth throughout time. Well, the problem is when you're managing a portfolio and rebalancing in that way, bringing it back to the original portfolio mix of half and half in my example, I'm going to have to incur a trading cost or a commission or a back-end surrender with the annuity. It doesn't make any sense to use that product in this particular manner. Why do people do it? Well, the reason quite often is this. Commissions are very high with these products. And a lot of firms, they actually require their advisors to recommend a certain amount of annuities for every person that walks in the door. Now, typically annuities are used for a different purpose. They were actually designed for a totally different purpose. And that was distribution toward the end of life. When somebody looks like they're going to run out of money, they're annuitized. Now, let me tell you something. One study showed there was only like 5% of annuities are ever used in that fashion. Most often they're sold as an accumulation vehicle like this, and they were never really designed for that purpose. If you want to learn more, call us for a free 15-minute phone call or go to our website, paulwinkler.com. The number 615-851-1950 or paulwinkler.com. We don't do anything on commission, and we like to rail against these types of things and help investors do what is in their best interest. paulwinkler.com.
Welcome back. Time flies when you're having fun, and we are at the end of the second hour of the Matt Murphy Show. I want to hit a couple things that I've seen on the Super Talk text line. I am trying to get to them. Even if I have to get to them after the show's over, I will communicate with you guys. I want to make sure that I'm being responsive to what you want to talk about. A couple things. Troy mentioned, well, Trump, he spent money to make money. You need to do that. You need a deficit spend to stimulate the economy, get things going. That's why we're $33 trillion in debt. That's a Democratic talking point, which is for every dollar we spend, we get 5 back. I mean, I've heard this. I've watched one economist letter after another. These guys get paid to do this sort of multiplication thing that it's like, well, if you spend $1, you get a bunch of more dollars out of thin air. It all works. And to be clear, there is an economic multiplier effect. But the idea that excuses $1 trillion in deficit spending is a Democratic talking point. And some of y'all are using that to be like, well, Trump's fine. He didn't deficit. Yeah, he did. He deficit spent. And I understand. Quit bashing Trump. I'm telling you the truth. The receipts are there. You can go look at it. Don't take my word for it. Look, and if Trump had a fiscally conservative track record, it'll be there. And you can tell me how I'm lying. The problem is you can't, because it's not there. And then it's, well, we want it. Well, you want it, but you don't, because you support politicians that don't. So like this is the quandary we find ourselves in repeatedly. We want balanced budget. We want fiscal conservatism. We want to stop the goodies. We want to shut down the government. We want to do this stuff. Okay, I hear you. But then you vote for politicians that do the opposite of that. But we like them, and the problem's the other guy. No, it's not. It's your guy. Now the other guy's a problem too. It's all of Congress. But if we play this game that telling the truth is bashing somebody, I mean, that's insane. I mean, that is truly bonkers. And the game's real easy. It's, well, anytime somebody says something that I don't like as a Republican, they're a rhino. Well, if you call somebody a rhino, make sure you're a don't know, because you don't want to be a don't know. That's worse than being a rhino. Being somebody who's ignorant of reality because you don't like how it sounds is crazy. And that was, frankly, one of Kevin McCarthy's biggest weaknesses, is he said crazy talk sounded normal, and he wanted to accommodate it. As a conservative who wants to limit government, secure the border, protect the rule of law, increase individual liberty, I want to win, baby. I don't want to feel better. I don't want somebody saying things that make me happy. I want somebody telling me the truth so we can actually have a game plan to win. And it is hard work. It's hard work. And that's where we are. That's what we're up against. We have reached the top of the hour. We got to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt Murphy on Super Talk 99.7.
It's 2 o'clock. I'm Mac Maury with your top stories right now. 77 degrees, mostly sunny right now. The chance for some showers this weekend, and also cooler temperatures have lows in the 40s over the weekend. Complete forecast 2 minutes away. A better than expected jobs report out today. The Labor Department saying the United States economy added 336,000 jobs in September. The unemployment rate was unchanged at 3.8%. President Biden commenting on the report, crediting Bidenomics. And after his remarks, the president criticized the GOP concerning federal budget negotiations. Karen Travers with the latest.
It says the September jobs report is good news, but he also warned about the potential consequences of a government shutdown if Congress doesn't pass legislation before funding runs out on November 17th. The president putting pressure on House Republicans.
It's time to stop fooling around. House Republicans, it's time for you to do your job.
The president said it's time to get to work for the American people, saying they're waiting and watching.
Right now in Tennessee, News 2 says a gun control bill has been filed for the upcoming General Assembly. Cookeville Republican State Rep Ryan Williams wanted to make it so anyone who's committed a felony or a misdemeanor of cruelty towards animals as a juvenile cannot buy guns legally until they're 25 years old.
My thought is how can we delay, not prevent them from being able to buy a weapon in the future, but how can we delay that so that there's actually a penalty to them for committing those acts, and so that they can reestablish themselves.
Williams says most active shooters are young adults whose brains are not fully developed. Crime in Tennessee. News 2 says that Metro Police K-9 assisted in catching an 18-year-old and putting him in custody. It was last night in the Edgell area when a Chevy Malibu was reported stolen. The teen attempted to run away after getting pulled over, but the K-9 was able to track him down. That teenager now currently charged with evading arrest. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Morey, WTN News.
Welcome back. I'm Cameron Smith, and we're having a blast today. We're in the last hour. Good grief, y'all are on fire. I love it. 615-737-9986. Here's one of the things that I care about more than anything in my writing over at the Tennessean, for AL.com, and when I fill in for Cumulus. I want Republicans to be resilient. I'm not about the baby whiny victim Republican. And I see it, and I'm just going to be honest about it. It's the, you hurt my feelings. You said some facts that said Trump wasn't the Messiah. Suck it up, Buttercup. And I mean that. Because I can take it. You can say you're pragmatic to the point where you're stupid. Okay, cool. You can call me a rhino. You can call me a fiscal conservative hawk. You can call me whatever you want to call me. But I want to win. And so I don't care if we have these exchanges that are heated. I care that we ultimately settle on a strategy to move our country in a more conservative direction. That's the game plan. I assume you guys want to win too. And so every last one of y'all that gets your feelings hurt over there because I say something or because Chris Hand says something or because Matt Murphy or anybody else asks tough questions or says, how are we going to do this? Quit whining. Don't behave like the Democrats who get their emotions hurt when when Ben Shapiro comes to campus and says something that disagrees with their ideology and they are victimized. If you are victimized or hurt or going to take your ball home because I say something that challenges what you want to believe, then you're the problem, not me. You're the reason that we have an inability to work together because you don't actually want to do that. You just want somebody to tell you you're right and clap for you. I'm not going to do that. I'm not here to clap for you. I'm here because I care about you. And I hope you care about me too. And I hope you care about the folks that take their time to work with you guys on this station, learn from you, and hopefully you can learn something from us. But the victim stuff, let the Democrats have that. Let them worry about the pronouns and their identities and all that stuff. If you can punch, I can take it. I hope you can take it too. And then we move forward. It's great. That's how this works. So we're going to have some hardball, and I love it. It's the most fun I have when we can go round and round and learn from each other and watch football at the end of the day. That's life, man. That's great. That's what we're here for. I've got Stan in Lebanon wants to talk Trump. What you got, Stan?
Hey, that comment earlier, you said Trump's not the Messiah. That reminded me of a conversation I had recently with one of my liberal relatives that told me the exact same thing. And I really infuriated this relative when I said, well, he's not the Messiah, but he's the son of the Messiah, and I can prove it. And they're like, how? And I had them Google Trump's dad's name. You do know what Trump's father's middle name is, right?
No, I don't.
Christ.
Well, I bet you had some fun with him on that, Stan.
Yeah, you can Google it. That's a fact. I thought that was something that drives them crazy. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. Well, that's a great point. And I tell you guys this almost every time on the air. I've got a savior, and it's Jesus. I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it's the power of salvation for everybody who believes, first for the Jew, then for the Gentile. I'm not. You know, the Bible's pretty clear what I got to do. I got to go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations. I got to tell people what I believe in a way that does service to the God I claim to follow. And sometimes I fail. Sometimes I just fall flat on my face. But I don't forget where my loyalties lie. I don't forget that that's my Savior. That he hung on the cross for me, and he paid the price for me. And so I don't actually worry that much about politics. I'm not worried about everything going to hell in a handbasket because the Bible talks about how this is going to go, and it's going to get rough, folks. And I don't need a politician to make it unrough for me. I need a politician who's going to use his brain, use her brain, have common sense, take America to a place that's good for my kids, good for your kids. That's what I actually want. And so I would just encourage you guys, don't put your treasure in politics. We can talk about it. It's fun. You know, we jaw back and forth, but at the end of the day, if you're looking for a savior to come rescue you from those folks in Congress, you're going to be waiting a real long time. And I don't hate them. I've been up there. I've seen there's a lot of good men and women in Congress. There's a lot of people who genuinely want to do the right thing. And I know their approval rating's like 17%. But I know a lot of good ones. Men and women of character who believe that America is the greatest experiment in free democracy and people governing themselves in the history of the world. It's still the shining city on a hill, and it still matters. And so I don't want you guys to feel like it's all over. I don't want you to be negative. The whole America's in a dark place, everything's awful. Well, guess what? I go out, I live over in Nolensville. When I go out and coach football, when I go hang out with my buddies, when I'm working with Thanks over in Franklin, it's great. Most folks are pretty nice down here. They engage you well, and when you get to know them, it's really encouraging. And so don't fall into this doom scrolling night on social media and Twitter and cable news and all that stuff. If people are telling you need to be afraid, if people are telling you it's over, our best days are behind us, you know what they're probably wanting to do is control you. Because when you're scared and afraid, you give up your reason. You don't think. And so I'm telling you, don't be afraid. I'm telling you, stand up. And I agree, we should fight. But it's not fight in this angry rage sense. We should uphold the Constitution. And when folks don't do that, when folks don't have fidelity to the rule of law, we don't need another big talker. We just need folks that'll do what we want, do what we say. They work for us. And when they don't, vote them out. I'm with you on that. And somebody had asked on the super text line, well, how do we reach out? Go to votesmart.org, votesmart.org. It's a free service. You go there, you enter your address. It tells you who your elected representatives are. Their phone numbers are there, and call them. I worked on Capitol Hill in the House and the Senate, and I can tell you the number of phone calls we got was low. There's a lot of people that'd rather talk about this stuff than actually call folks. That's the truth. They get so mad about how everybody behaves and how everybody's terrible, but they don't call them and tell them what they think. Call them, write them, do it. It actually matters. You can use social media if that's easier for you. Everybody's got a Twitter X handle. They got the threads. All kinds of ways to get a hold of folks. But actually do it and tell them what you think, because that's what matters. It doesn't matter if I tell you what I think or you tell me what you think. Like, that's great if we don't tell our elected officials what we think. And I call them and I tell them. A lot of them I know, folks I've worked with, say, what in the world are you doing? And make them think about it. Make them wonder if you're going to run against them. I do. I genuinely do that. And I think that you should too, because when they're looking over their shoulder, they're not spending as much time trying to do sleight of hand and distract us, because they want to stay in office. And I understand that. But they have to have that threat. That's the reality. And that's certainly okay. But that's why we need to play hardball. That's why it should be hardball in the House and the Senate and in these elections. And we should go. I'm not kidding about going and knocking on doors and talking to folks and saying, hey, we need a candidate. Because on the super text line, a couple of y'all said, well, it's not my fault that Walker lost. It's not my fault that Dr. Oz lost. I hear you. You know, most people don't take the time to go into those swing areas. And frankly, some of us from red states probably wouldn't help a whole lot anyway. But you can encourage people who do, you know, relatives that might live up there, and you say, hey, you know, look at that candidate. Maybe that's a better option. Maybe that gives us a better chance in the general election. I think that that's the right answer, is you got to engage and figure out how. Don't just simply restate the problem, because we're there. We know the problem. It's real serious. And yet here we are with the House not in session till Wednesday. I mean, you guys know Hunter Biden was in court on criminal charges. We didn't talk about that. We didn't talk about all the senators saying Menendez needs to resign on corruption charges. I said this when I was hosting Dan's show. Where's Joe Biden? I mean, seriously, where's Joe Biden in all of this? Previously, when we had threats of shutdown and we were in disarray, Biden would be right there to say, see, look, they can't govern, they can't do this stuff, piling on. But it's not like Democrats aren't in chaos. How are Democrats going to say, you know what? We are serious about fighting extremism. We don't let the fringes control, and we're going to do something about that. And so they voted with 8 Republicans to kick out the speaker. Again, I'm not sympathetic to McCarthy, but where were the Democrats who were against extremism? Where were those very reasonable, moderate Democrats who want what's best for the country as opposed to their own political party? Where were they? Did anybody see them? Because I sure missed them. Because it looked a lot like they said, we're very pro-extremism if we think it politically profits us. So one of the silver linings in all of this is that Democrats can, well, my wife won't let me say that on the air. Democrats are not serious about dealing with political extremism on any front because they're not even willing. They kept the government open because they worked with McCarthy, and then they were like, see you, bud. I mean, if you think that those guys are the ones that are going to help conservatives move in a more conservative direction, think again. Because they're deeply unserious about dealing with this highly polarized political environment. One of the callers earlier made a great point. You know what? We should be able to work together because the truth is, there's Democrats who are going to agree with me on a lot of things. There's Democrats who are going to disagree with me on a lot of things. There's Republicans who are going to agree and disagree with me on stuff. And so however we put together a majority that moves us in a more conservative direction, count me in. If Democrats are in that, great. If independents are in that, great. You don't have to sacrifice your principles to work with a Democrat. You just got to look at the issue and say, is it the right answer? And if the principle of Kevin, as Matt Gaetz said, if the principle is Kevin McCarthy's bad for the country and we need to get rid of him, the Democrats see it and we side with them. Okay, that's fine. Matt Gaetz can stand before his constituents and defend that. And the majority of Republicans on the other side can too. And one of the things that I'd throw out to you guys before we head into this break is if the majority of Republicans thought, what my constituents really want is for me to vote out McCarthy and then figure it out, they would have done it because they want to keep their jobs. And so this idea, well, they wanted to do it, but they didn't because of some special interest. Well, guess what? You can talk about special interest all day long. At the end of the day, they got to answer their voters to stay in office. So my guess is they looked at it and said, am I better off? Andy Ogles looked at it and said, am I better off back home, avoiding the distraction, or being the 9th one of these guys without a plan? And that's what he decided to do. You can like it or not. I get to vote for him, and I'm sure many of you do too. And you decide whether you like it or not. And then we'll see whoever's running against him, if he has a challenger, whether they're a better option. And that's how we sort it out. That's how we do it. That's how the Constitution prescribes it. And so I'm going to support that. And it's a slow slog to get back to where we need to go. So we better get started. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Matt Murphy Show, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
A better than expected jobs report and a shocking scene outside of Colorado Springs. I'll tell you what, 2:30 Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back. Man, I wish we had more time. I wish there were more of me to get to all of the issues on the Super Talk text line, 615-737-9986. I just want you guys to know how much I appreciate you, how much the back and forth helps me grow, helps me learn, informs my columns, kind of the way that I want to tackle the issues, because you're the audience. You're the folks that if I want to say this is the right path forward, I got to convince you guys. I can't just say, this is it. Deal with it. If you don't like it, bah. That's not a thing. I think we need to have that exchange. We need to be smart about it. And I know that sometimes my approach is uncomfortable because it challenges a lot of Republicans. Well, I know I'm not a Democrat. I want Republicans to be better. I don't like this idea of, well, let me work with Democrats to try to make them better at what they do. I want Republicans to be better at what we do. Because I truly believe, like, you want to talk to true believer? I believe we have to spend within our means. We got to get there. And we keep going in the other direction and wondering what's going on. It's like, well, we had to do it this time. Well, we always have to do it this time. When do we get to stop? And the answer is when we have the votes to stop it. You talk about a shutdown. You know why we fold all the time? It's because you got 150 to 200 Republicans that are like, you know what? We don't have a better game plan. So, we're going to lose politically on this, so we need to keep rolling. And I hear you guys saying, no, we don't. We need to shut it down. Well, you have to convince the other folks of that. And that's hard work. That's the hearts and minds stuff. That's the, hey, we got to know enough about policy to be dangerous. You don't have to be a nerd like me. You don't have to look at federal budgets and deficit spending levels and historical tables and the president's proposal and all. No, I get that. That's why I'm here, is because I do that stuff, because I nerd out on it and then we talk about it. But if you're not going to do that, which is fine, because that means you're a normal human who probably sees the sunshine more, then don't just play the deny reality game. The don't knows. Don't know Republicans. Sort of like the other side of a rhino. A rhino is like, I just really don't know about conservatism. It's bleh. But a don't know is like, I don't have any idea how to move things in a more conservative trajectory, so I just want to burn it all down. That's the don't knows. The number of you guys that have gotten on the super text line and tried to explain to me that Trump's deficit spending was really necessary to get the economy going and so that we get a better economic churn in return, that's literally the same argument that Nancy Pelosi makes. That we have to deficit spend because it's good for the economy. This is kind of like, I spoke to a group the other day and some Democrats stood up and said, I don't understand why you don't just support open-ended spending in Ukraine, because they're building all the stuff domestically in the United States and sending the arms over to Ukraine. So it's good for the American economy. This isn't money we're handing to Ukraine. We're spending it here at home. It's creating jobs. And then the Ukraine uses the weapons to defend itself. I mean, sure, that's what we could do. But that argument of government spending is good for the economy, so we must have government spending on everything, is how we got to $33 trillion in debt. Well, the government, when it spends, do you know how many politicians come out and go cut ribbons and do those things when they spend money at home? Earmarks or otherwise? And I'm fine with Congress doing direct spending. That's what an earmark is. It's we're spending it directly. We're not giving it to Joe Biden to decide how he wants to spend it. I mean, that's nobody ever talks about earmarks that way, but that's how they work. Either you spend it directly from Congress and it's signed into law and it tells you what to spend directly, or You give it to the executive branch agencies and they decide how to spend it. So if it's a Democrat in office, then it's just Democratic spending. I mean, that's it. But that's the kind of stuff that you have to know. You have to know how these things work. Because if you have a Republican House and Senate, guess what? Direct spending makes a lot of sense. You can spend on conservative priorities. And if you're saying, well, we don't want earmarks and Joe Biden's the guy in the White House, but you have a conservative House and Senate, then maybe you do want earmarks. I mean, I know that sounds wild, but that's exactly how the Constitution works. It envisioned Congress having the power of the purse to do the actual spending. But it's easier to not know things. It's easier to just vent your spleen, and that's what I'm pushing back on. And it's not that I don't like you guys who do that. It's that I want you to think. I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just too level-headed on this. Maybe I need to have some fire. But then the question is, okay, let's have some fire, but how does that help me get a majority? You know, maybe I go yell at somebody in a swing state and say, get it together. Well, no, I mean, I need them to like me. I want them to think that, hey, these Republicans are reasonable. They make a lot of sense. They're making a lot more sense than these Democrats who are telling me that, you know, I need to use the right pronouns all the time, even though I have no idea what's going on. That's how you win. That's how you win in those swing states. Is stuff that seems kind of weird, like all the stuff that they're pushing. I mean, have y'all seen some of these kids' books? They're quote unquote kids' books. And if you just open them, you're like, whoa, bud. That's weird. This isn't about free speech, or I am not a book banner but those books belong in the adult section. They're not kids' books. I mean, some of them are obscene. And we can win on that issue all day long because parents care about their kids, and if their kids are, you know, looking at weird sexualized stuff at young ages, it gets their attention. Anyway, we got to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to The Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7.
.231, I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. A mostly sunny day right now, 78 degrees on Music Row. And taking a look at the weekend, we'll see some cooler temperatures with lows in the 40s. But clear skies, no showers in the forecast. And we got a full weather forecast coming up in 2 minutes. A better than expected jobs report out today. The Labor Department saying the U.S. economy added 336,000 jobs in September. The unemployment rate was unchanged at 3.8%. President Biden commenting on the report, crediting Bidenomics. And after his remarks, the president asked about the House Speaker vacancy and working with whomever gets the job.
Whomever the House Speaker is, I'm going to try to work with. They control half the Congress. And I'm going to try to work with them. There's some people I imagine it's going to be easier to work with than others. But whoever the Speaker is, I'll try to work with.
And the House is adjourned until next Wednesday. And a shocking scene uncovered in Penrose, Colorado, outside of Colorado Springs. Alex Stone has the story.
When deputies responded to a report of an odor coming from the Return to Nature funeral home, they say they found 115 decomposing bodies improperly stored inside of a 2,500 square foot storage area. The bodies so badly decomposed it will take DNA to know who they were. Fremont County Sheriff Alan Cooper.
The area of the funeral home where the bodies were improperly stored was horrific.
Families had been saying they were waiting to get remains of their loved ones from the funeral home. Nobody has been arrested. The FBI is calling in teams from across the country to help process the scene.
And that is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
Welcome back. We are running out of time. Time is not on our side. But, man, I'm having fun, and I'm learning from you guys, and I appreciate it. I mean, a couple of you guys have said something that makes a lot of sense, that, hey, you didn't like McCarthy. You didn't want him in there. He wasn't the right speaker. I agree with you. I think that's a very fair point. But you didn't like Gates' timing. Like, he stepped on the Hunter Biden stuff. We're dealing with the funding issue. It's like, why now? You could have done this at any time, but you picked a bad time. And I think that's a fair critique to say you don't like McCarthy. I'm excited. I'd rather have Jordan or Scalise. I'm not excited about, the idea of doing this again and again and again because we lose the House. Like, okay, we got rid of McCarthy. Point made. We get a more conservative speaker. Sweet. I'm all about that. But I don't want to keep playing this game. And one of the things that you guys may not know, I didn't know until I looked at it, the way that the whole single member making a motion to vacate the chair has been the historical norm. It was actually, I think, Nancy Pelosi. It was the Democrats that changed it, and Republicans changed it back. So the norm is one person doing it or being able to do it. It's just that they have enough common sense not to use it against their own people. So I actually don't support changing that rule. I'd say use the historical norm. But the question then is, if we're going to play this game as a Republican Party and keep a clown show going, what happens when Jim Jordan is the speaker? And let's just say he puts an abortion ban on the floor. And rather than vote on that and have political controversy, 8 members of the Republican Party join with all the Democrats and make a motion to vacate the chair. Well, if that's the way that we want to do it, then we're doing it. And I don't see what the argument is why they can't do that. Well, they're being brave. They think their constituents want it. They're representing them well. And this is the way it goes. It ain't going to work. If we keep playing this game, we got to find a consensus speaker in the Republican Party and then basically say, we're done. This is the speaker. This is the speaker for the rest of the Congress. We're not going to play speaker round robin anymore. And if you do, you're out of the conference and we're going to break you politically. I know that's upsetting to some of you, but every last one of y'all that are upset by that, if it were some members from New York and California that did that to a speaker, Jim Jordan, you'd do it in 2 seconds. And you know it, and I know it. Yeah, I do want people to think independently. I do want them to submit, hey, this is the right legislation. We should vote on this and go. But ultimately, we got to move legislation out of the House. We got to move appropriations bills. We got to do that stuff in a conservative fashion. And if we don't have a majority to do that, we're in trouble. That's how our system works. I keep telling y'all that, and y'all keep saying, well, no, we can keep doing this. Well, then you're just empowering Democrats. That's what you're doing. A couple of y'all have said that you've said this notion of these 8 fell on the sword for the rest of the Republicans. I just don't believe you. It is way more difficult for Andy Ogles to explain why he didn't want to vote for the distraction of throwing out Kevin McCarthy than it would be for him to just throw him under the bus, especially once he knows he's gone. And that's the fallacy about the Burchett argument of, well, I was doing it so other Republicans didn't have to. Well, that only makes sense and is only true if it would be easier for Andy Ogles or, frankly, the majority of Republicans to just stick with McCarthy. And for most, particularly folks like Andy Ogles, it's actually a lot harder for him to say, you know what? I don't want the distraction, so I'm not going to play this game. That is a harder political position than it is for him to just say, you know what? Throw him under the bus. I was skeptical of him at first. I know that he doesn't have the votes, so he's out. I've watched 1,000 votes in D.C., and the reason that vote held like it did was because the rest of the majority of the Republican Party was freaking pissed at the 8. They were mad because they said, we don't need this distraction right now. Even if you don't like McCarthy, let's deal with it later. We don't need to play this game. And Matt Gaetz said, tough, suck it. I'm going to go vote with the Democrats. Deal with it. I want you to eat a big old sandwich of not fun. That's what actually happened. That was the vote. So this idea that McCarthy, that somehow Ogles is taking the easy route, that Burchett offered him cover to vote for McCarthy, you have got to be kidding me. Andy Ogles may draw a primary singly because McCarthy endorsed him and he didn't make a motion to vacate the chair. Now, I think he's going to probably survive that. But that's that harder position. It's way easier to be like, this California Republican is dumb. So, I mean, I see y'all making that argument. I'm not a buyer there. I think that's a big issue. And so we can keep twisting and turning and trying to say up is down and left is right, but I'm not playing ball anymore. I'm going to call it like I see it. And this is a fair question, and I saw this on the super text line. Do you see good versus evil more than Republican versus Democrat coming soon? That's the way I see it now. There's really just right and wrong. Now, in politics, there's a lot of discretionary decisions. Like you sort of look at it and you say, well, this is sort of good, sort of bad. Okay. They're tough calls. That's the reason we elect people to do it, is they represent us, because we couldn't do our daily jobs if we had to think about every single vote that they have to think about. They're making judgment calls all the time. And y'all are going to laugh at this. I pulled this up. I'm glad that y'all reminded me. I said, for the 118th Congress, on material votes, I'm not talking about post office namings and stuff like that. Guess what the head-to-head voting record comparison between Matt Gaetz and Kevin McCarthy is? There were 244 votes in the 118th Congress. How many of these major votes, not like little post office namings, how many do you think they disagreed on? 40. The two of them agreed 85% of the time, 84% of the time. So that is Matt Gaetz, the bold champion, and Kevin McCarthy. The margin we're talking about here in terms of disagreement is 16%. On most stuff, Republicans stay on the same page. And so we're not talking about this idea of like, well, these are the rhinos. I mean, this is useful for political stuff to say these are the MAGA folks and these are the extremists and these are. I can pull the voting records. Republicans vote in lockstep almost all the time. Democrats do the same. So when we're talking about what does it look to be different, it's who's putting the legislation on the table, what are we negotiating from, and how does it move us in a more conservative direction? And I think good versus evil is where we are. If we see something that's evil, we shouldn't do it. I disagree passionately with Dez's take before I came on the air of like, we're not looking for a pastor, we're looking for a president. Well, right, but character still matters. Good versus evil matters. Somebody that's trustworthy versus somebody who's not, that matters. So when you're voting for somebody, you better make sure that's the kind of person you want your name stuck next to. When I vote for anybody, and I'm talking anybody for any election, the way I think about it is if I had to justify my decision to my kids consistent with my character, what would I say? And if I have to explain a lot of times saying why I voted for them, but I don't really support their character or their whatever, it doesn't matter whether it's Trump or who it is, I'm not going to do it. I'm just not. And it's not because I'm looking for Boy Scouts. I'm looking for honorable people to lead the country. And I saw this with the Democrats, that they were moral relativists, that the leadership of the Democratic Party did not care about who was up there, provided that the answer was whatever you want goes. There's no right and wrong. I saw that time and again working on the Hill. We Republicans said, hey, there's some things that are right and wrong. And now what I see the Republican Party doing is, well, actually, we don't believe that anymore. Not when it comes to politics. There's no right and wrong. You can just do whatever you want as long as you get what you want. And man, I think that's a bad example for the next generation. I don't subscribe to that. I don't want to lose. I want to win. But like, I'm not going to cheat. I'm not going to do stuff that compromises my integrity just for the sake of a political vote. Like, we can't do that. We can't be those type of people. And some of y'all have asked, is like that what we should do? Is that where we should go? And then you say, oh, I was just joking. I wonder. Because I don't want to be like them. I don't want to be like the liberals. I don't want to be like the progressives who say, you know, because you believe that Jesus is your Lord and Savior, you're a bigot. You're hateful. You're evil. I don't want to be like them. I don't want to behave like them. I want to be different. I want to say, hey, you don't agree with me? You don't believe what I believe? That's great. That's okay. Maybe we can find some common ground and work on something. But I don't want to do what Democrats do, just in a different direction. Then what's the point? I'm just looking at a menu of things I want from government. I'm not principled anymore. I don't care. It's just who's going to give me the better goodies. Are they going to direct dollars to New York and California, or are they going to direct it to Tennessee and Alabama? That's what we're up against. And I don't think we have to do that. I hope y'all don't. I hope y'all aren't so far gone and, you know, say that it doesn't matter. It does. Character matters. Who we are matters, because I got a bunch of boys in my house that they're being told every day by the voices around them that the only thing that matters is them. What they want. There are no bigger issues. There is no country. There is no family. There is no God. It's just whatever you want, whatever makes you feel good. I'm not about that. That's not what I'm going to teach him. I'm going to push back on that every day, and I can't be any different in my politics, and I hope neither can you. We got to take a break. We'll finish up. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to The Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7.
Hey folks, Paul Winkler here. One of the things that we see from time to time, well, way too often, is this. Let's say that you go to a financial advisor and they say, hey, you need to set up an investment portfolio, and what we need to do is Hey folks, Paul Winkler here. One of the things that we see from time to time, well, way too often, is this. Let's say that you go to a financial advisor and they say, hey, you need to set up an investment portfolio, and what we need to do is we need to have some of your money in stocks or mutual funds or ETFs or something like that, and we need to have something fixed or guaranteed in your investment portfolio that'll protect you against the market downturns. And quite often what they're talking about, they may not use this word, but often what they're talking about is putting your money into some sort of an annuity, like an indexed annuity or something like that, or a fixed annuity. And what they're doing is they're saying, hey, let's put your money in both of these, which sounds really good. And you should. And typically in an investment portfolio, you do want to have fixed investments and stocks as well in the portfolio to protect against inflation. But here's what happens when you manage a portfolio. Let me use a really, really simple example. Let's say I have a portfolio and I got stocks in there. Then I have my fixed income, my bonds in the portfolio as well. And let's say I have half my money in each. When stocks really do well, what we want to do is they're going to be overweighted in my portfolio. I own too much of them because they've done well compared to bonds. It was supposed to be half and half, and now maybe it's 70% stocks and 30% bonds, let's say, or something like that. So I want to sell some of this and buy some of that to bring it back to 50-50 and back and forth throughout time. Well, the problem is when you're managing a portfolio and rebalancing in that way, bringing it back to the original portfolio mix of half and half in my example, I'm going to have to incur a trading cost or a commission or a back-end surrender with the annuity. It doesn't make any sense to use that product in this particular manner. Why do people do it? Well, the reason quite often is this. Commissions are very high with these products. And a lot of firms, they actually require their advisors to recommend a certain amount of annuities for every person that walks in the door. Now, typically annuities are used for a different purpose. They were actually designed for a totally different purpose. And that was distribution toward the end of life, when somebody looks like they're going to run out of money, they're annuitized. Now, let me tell you something. One study showed there was only like 5% of annuities are ever used in that fashion. Most often they're sold as an accumulation vehicle like this, and they were never really designed for that purpose. If you want to learn more, call us for a free 15-minute phone call or go to our website, paulwinkler.com. The number 615-851-1950 or paulwinkler.com. We don't do anything on commission, and we like to rail against these types of things and help investors do what is in their best interest. paulwinkler.com.
President Biden with an update on the new border wall, a possible new gun control bill here in Tennessee, and a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old left home alone for hours. I'll tell you what happened. Those stories and more at 3 o'clock. Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back. It's been fun. It's actually been real fun. I've loved the exchange with you guys. A couple of things that y'all said that I want to address, and then we'll pull in Brian Wilson to talk about what he's going to talk about. Cameron, don't you think sometimes we have to vote for the lesser of two evils? I don't vote for evil. I'm just not going to do it. Like, you shouldn't either. And if some politician is saying, if you don't vote the right way, America is over, don't buy it, don't believe it, don't do it. So, Brian, I got a question for you.
Yes, sir. How you doing?
What are you going to talk about that isn't the speaker's race?
I'm going to talk about how there is one of the most fascinating stories I've seen today is that humans may have been in North America much earlier than was previously thought.
Really?
I think, yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, and it's blowing up the preconceived ideas about when Indian cultures moved into North America.
Well, that actually does sound really fascinating. I'm going to have to hang around and listen to that. Who do you have for the speaker? Who's it going to be on Wednesday?
Well, I think now I would say slight edge to Jim Jordan, but I think it's going to be real hard to get 218 out of 221 or 22 votes. So it's, I think, many ballots. But I would say right now the guy that has the edge is Jim Jordan.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely correct. And I hope you're correct for the next several hours. I'm out of here.